let's take a look at what today's jargon term is. And Traven and I are both stunned that we've never actually covered this phrase before. We talk about it endlessly on the show, but we've never actually done it as jargon of the day. And it's function of behavior. This is something that gets talked about so much that nobody really defines what it is and tells us what exactly are we talking about. So often, you get a diagnosis and you get into this community and this gets said, and eventually it starts to make sense to you. So let's stop that train and see if we can't make sense first. So let's take a look at first we give you the actual definition and we make fun of it whenever possible. Then we give you a working definition where we try to really hone down, like, what are we really talking about here? And if you don't get it the first time, please don't panic. That's most of us. But I promise you, over time, it'll start to make sense when you see it happening in your life. So function of behavior, what in the heck are we talking about? Let's take a look at our actual definition. And I got to give you a little bit of a disclaimer here. It was really hard to find an actual definition because it's so ubiquitous everywhere that nobody even bothers to define it, which made me very frustrated. But this is based on the scientific premise that behavior, both positive behaviors that we're trying to increase and problem behaviors that we're trying to decrease, are not random and that they're motivated by a reason. And this is referred to as the function of the behavior. Every behavior has a specific function that maintains the behavior. And it's one of those things where if you squint, you're like, what are they saying? I don't quite, what do you mean? The specific function that maintains the behavior, huh? But let's go back to the part that probably was making sense, that there are some behaviors that we want to increase and there are some behaviors that we want to decrease. And this is across the board, all people, everywhere. Doesn't matter if you're on the spectrum, you're not on the spectrum. We all have behaviors that we want to increase. Like maybe you want to increase how much you work out. And we all have behaviors that we want to decrease. Maybe you want to stop smoking, or maybe you want to stop, overeating, or maybe, whatever. You want to write more. Whatever behavior you want to increase, whatever behavior you want to decrease, right? That's all of us. But that behavior, before we can change it, we have to understand that behavior is not random. And this really resonates, I think, with people who are on the spectrum and people who love people who are on the spectrum. When somebody is doing a behavior, it's never random. Like, try that on for size for just a second. I know when my son was being diagnosed with autism, he was lining up his little cars, and I was like, that's just random. That is just random. No, it's not random at all. What function of behavior talks about is that it has a reason, that there is a reason and a need for why the person is doing it. So for somebody who is flapping their hands, there's a reason why they're flapping their hands. If there's somebody who's clearing their throat over and over again, there's a reason why. Somebody who's tapping their toe, even when no music is playing, there is a reason why that is happening. And usually, whatever it is that we're doing helps to make sure that behavior happens again. So that's what the maintain the behavior. Let's move on to our working definition, which I think really cuts right to the chase of it. If we understand behavior this way, what is the paycheck for the behavior? That when we do a behavior, especially when we do it over and over and over again, and we are all engaged in behavior every single day, every single moment, right? What is the paycheck that we get for the behavior? And before we can begin to understand, like, how are we going to change this behavior? Like, how are we going to increase this behavior, or how are we going to decrease this behavior? We have to understand what the paycheck is for the current behavior, because it's sort of the thing as a mom, the thing that bothered me so much was that my son had a pacifier. He was a kid who was into a pacifier, and for not a long period of time. He weaned himself off of it, thank goodness, because I would still let him have a pacifier because it was so heartbreaking for me. People were like, oh, you don't want to give a baby a pacifier, but it soothed him. Right. And I always hear parents who are like, oh, somebody wants to take this away from my child. And the parent is like, this. And the thing I think that's so important to recognize is whatever that thing is, it has a purpose in that individual's life. So if there's a child who likes sucking on a pacifier, why? What's the paycheck for sucking on a pacifier? And for most people, it is a sensory thing, that the sucking mechanism is a soothing mechanism. So we don't want to just take the pacifier away because we've taken away that individual's ability to soothe themselves. And that would be mean and cruel and terrible, right? But we want this person to be able to communicate all of their needs, right? And maybe sucking on a pacifier is preventing them from building up the muscles that they need to be able to sing and to talk. And when you have a pacifier, you're not as stimulated to make a noise that will lead to conversation, right? So we don't necessarily want to give in to the behavior and say it's working, so we're never going to let you progress past that. That doesn't seem like a good choice either. But if we really effectively want to be able to make this person have the best chance to do the things that are going to be meaningful to them, we still have to fulfill the need that the first thing created. So going back to the pacifier, if it's the thing to soothe them, before we take it away, we have to give them something else that soothes them. Right? So and I think we all understand that, but then let's take it to something else. Let's say that it's an adult who is smoking, and we want to figure out what is the paycheck for smoking. And for different adults, it will be different things. Maybe for one adult, it's that they get a break, that their job is very high stress, and that things get to a certain point and they get to take a break and they get to take the elevator down and go stand outside and socialize with people, and it's a break. And if they're not smoking, they don't get the break, right? That could be why. Well, if that's the case, we would want to give them a different break that's more fun for them than the smoking, right? There are other people that it's a sensory issue, that the smoking it and the inhaling and the sting of it, that there's a sensory issue that's pleasurable to them. So we can't just go, oh, sorry, you can't have that anymore. We would want to give that sensation in a different way. And I know people that have, like the vaping is part of what, for those people, that works to help diminish so that they can wean themselves off of it. So this is not just something that is for autism, but it happens to work really well with autism. And I think it's a really compassionate way of looking at things. So if your kiddo is engaged in a behavior, or you are engaged in a behavior that other people are saying is problematic, let's not just ask for it to go away. Let's look at the behavior, look at the function of the behavior, and see what is the need that we need to fulfill, and can we fulfill it in another way? And if we can, then we can begin to look at how this behavior will no longer serve the person. And that's the compassionate and effective way, scientifically proven, effective way to change behavior in a meaningful way. And the meaningful is important. I see people are writing in. You're excited about Twinkle. Twinkle is coming up. Don't despair. Twinkle will be with us in just a few minutes. And I know somebody wrote in and said biting is very random, except this is part of the mindset that we have to shift, that behavior is not random, especially if it happens more than once, that we have to let go of that idea that it is random. And we've talked before on the show about the 3-term contingency. If you're thinking that behavior is random, I want you to go to our Jargon playlist on YouTube and look up the 3-term contingency, which is the ABCs of behavior, and see how it is not random. And so I want, for that parent who thinks that the biting might be random, what it might be is that there's more than one function, that sometimes when a behavior is very effective in one area, we use it in other areas. So we talk about the 4 usual suspects, the reasons why people do something, what the paycheck is. Usually it's one of 4 with an asterisk for the 5th one: for attention, to gain access to someone or something, to get away from someone or something, or because it feels good. So imagine sometimes if biting worked to get your attention, then I'm going to keep doing it. But then later on, I might discover that it feels good too. Like the act of biting something, especially if you're in an age group where teeth are still coming in, which is basically anybody under the age of 12, and sometimes teenagers with their wisdom teeth. So now I'm biting for attention, but I'm also biting because it feels good. And then I find out, oh, when I bite somebody, they put me in a timeout. So now I find out it gets me an escape from something. So now I'm biting different occasions for different things, but it's not random. That's the one thing we know for sure. So I'm going to send you a hug and ask you to do that ABC sheet that we've shown before. Check out 3-term contingency, and I think that that will help you. Hi, I'm Shannon Penrod. If you just watched one of our jargon videos and you liked it, then you are probably a perfect candidate to come and work at the Center for Autism and Related Disorders. That's right, CARD is hiring. They're looking for BCBAs and behavior technicians. Whether you've got experience or you're gain experience, you could be a part of this amazing team, and they are literally hiring all over the United States and in some cases around the world. So if you're interested, please go to careers@centerforautism.com. I can't wait for you to be a part of this amazing team of people who are getting it done. Careers@centerforautism.com. Tell them that Shannon at Autism Live sent you. Let's be a part of the same team.